All right. Peace, everybody. What's going on? This your girl Tiffany coming through live in effect. I'm coming back again because I want to do the video about protoscience versus pseudoscience. All right. So earlier when I did my video, I wasn't feeling all that well, but I'm feeling a little bit better now. Okay. So yeah, I want to get in this topic because a lot of people may not understand the difference between protoscience and pseudoscience. Even myself, I had to look up the information and be able to like have a clear understanding of the difference between the two. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to compare and contrast how is pseudoscience different from protoscience and how are they very similar to one another, and I'm gonna give some examples. All right, so I'm gonna use sources. I always use sources to back up information because I don't like to get stuff off of the top of my head. All right, I always want to be able to have a source to guide me into the information, into the topic. All right, so let's look up protoscience, as you can see right there. All right, so what is protoscience? In philosophy of science, there are several definitions of protoscience. Its simplest, most closely reflecting its roots of proto plus science, involves the earliest era of the history of science when scientific methods was still nascent. Another meaning extends this idea into present, with protoscience being an emerging field of study which is still not completely scientific but later becomes a proper science. An example of its an example of it is the general theory of relativity, which started as a protoscience, a theoretical work which have not been tested, but later was experimentally verified and became fully scientific. Protoscience, in this sense, is distinguished from pseudoscience by a genuine willingness to be changed through new evidence, as opposed to having a theory that can always find a way to rationalize a predetermined belief. Okay. Then also goes on to say philosophers of chemistry, Jab Bokal defines protoscience as the study of normative criteria for the use of experimental technology in science. Thomas Kuhn said the protoscience generate testable conclusion, but nevertheless resemble philosophy and the arts rather than the established sciences in their developmental pattern. I think, for example, of fields like chemistry and electricity before the mid 18th century, of the study of heredity and of phylogeny before the mid 19th, or any of the social science today, while noting that they meet the democratization criteria of possibility from Popper. He questions whether the discussion in protoscience field result in clearing up progress. Clear-cut progress. Kuhn concluded that protoscience, like the arts and philosophy, lacks some element which in the mature science permits the more obvious forms of progress. It is not, however, anything that a methodological prescription can provide. I claim no therapy to assist the transformation of a proto-science to a science, nor do I suppose any of this sort is to be had. All right. And then it goes down to talk about pre-scientific. Oops. All right, so the term pre-scientific means a root relating to an era before science exists. For example, traditional medicine existed for thousands of years before medical science did, and thus many aspects of it can be described as pre-scientific. In a related sense, proto-scientific topics such as alchemy of Newton days can be called pre-scientific. In the case, the proto and pre-labels can function more or less synonymously. The latter focus more sharply on the idea that nothing but science is science. Compare French science, which is considered highly speculative or even strongly refuted. Some proto-science go on to become an accepted part of mainstream science. All right. So right there. Okay, so basically proto-science is like science that's based on hypotheses. Okay, it has been hypothesized, but it has not been fully proven to be scientifically. It has not gone through the experimental process of being considered as scientific. So it just still stands at a hypothesis. So, or a hypothetical science, so to speak. So basically, it still have to go through the necessary process in order to be considered, whether it be science or whether it be pseudoscience. You see what I'm saying? So, and in order for that to happen, it has to go through the process of being falsified. All right. So meaning that if you put out information, let's say, okay, you got a hypothesis, you have to consider the fact that it can be proven to be false, or you have to question yourself, well, what if it is false? Well, let's see if it is falsified. If it's false, then I would have to come up with another hypothesis and go through that process to test it to see if it's false. Now, but if it is turned out to be true and relevant, then it's at a standstill. It's at a good, it can pass by to the mainstream. But if not, then basically it'll be considered as pseudoscience. So, as a matter of fact, I'm gonna go into what pseudoscience is. All right. Oops. Let's look up what pseudoscience is, because that's everybody's favorite word, pseudoscience. All right. Okay. Now, what is pseudoscience? Pseudoscience is a claim, belief, or practice present as scientific, but which does not adhere to the scientific method. A field, practice, or body of knowledge can reasonably be called pseudoscientific when it is presented as consistent with the norms of scientific research, but it demonstrably fails to meet these norms. Pseudoscience is often characterized by the following: contradictory, exaggerated, unprovable claims, over reliance on confirmation rather than the rigorous attempts at refutation, lack of openness to evaluation by other experts in the field, and absent of systematic practices when rationally developed theories. The term pseudoscience is often considered a pejorative because it suggests something is being inaccurately or even deceptively portrayed as science. Accordingly, those labeled as practicing or advocating pseudoscience often dispute the characterization. Now, check this out. It says, science is distinguishable from revelation, theology, or spirituality in that it offers insight into the physical world obtained by empirical research and testing. Commonly held beliefs in popular science may not meet the criteria of science. Pop science may blur the divide between science and pseudoscience among the general public, and may also involve science fiction. Pseudoscientific beliefs are widespread even among science teachers and newspaper editors. All right. Now, demarcation between science and pseudoscience have philosophical and scientific implication. Differentiating science from pseudoscience has practical implication in the case of healthcare, expert testimony, environmental policies, and science education. Distinguishing scientific facts and theories from pseudoscientific beliefs, such as those found in astrology, alchemy, medical quakery, occult beliefs, and science and creation science combined with scientific concept is part of science education and scientific literacy. All right. Now let's look up the etymology real fast. The etymology, the word pseudoscience is derived from the Greek root pseudo, meaning false, and the English word science, although the term has been in use since at least the late 18th century. Okay. And used in 1796 in reference to alchemy. The concept of pseudoscience as distinct from real or proper science appeared to have emerged in the mid-19th century. Among the first recorded uses of the word pseudoscience was in 1844 in the Northern Journal of Medicine. All right. That opposed kind of innovation which pronounces what has been recognized as a branch of science to have been a pseudoscience composed merely of so-called facts connected together by misapprehensions under the disguise of principles. An earlier recorded use of the term was in 1843 by the French philologist Francois Mengende. During the 20th century, the word was used as a pejorative to describe explanation of phenomena which were claimed to be scientific, but which were not, in fact, supported by reliable experimental evidence. From time to time, though, the usage of the word occurred in a more formal, technical manner around a perceived threat to individual and institutional security in a social and cultural setting. All right. So, again, that's dealing with the concept of pseudoscience. Now, the comparison, okay? We're going to talk about the comparison. Basically, both ideas start off as philosophical. And what I mean by that, because philosophy is the earliest form of political science, okay? Economics, social science, any type of field that we're studying today, it all started off as philosophy. All right. So philosophy is the main branch, right? Even metaphysics is philosophy. All right. It's the main branch that has opened the doors for various science subjects. Okay. So you cannot talk about psychology, biology, astronomy, or astrology, or all these different subjects without talking about philosophy. So what they both have in common is the philosophy. All right. And they both start off as being hypothetical. All right. Until it can be proven otherwise. But the only difference is with protoscience, the information has not been proven to be falsifiable, or it has not been proven to be scientific. Okay. But with pseudoscience, it has been proven to be falsified, right? And it has been proven to be unscientific. However, there's still people that will regurgitate outdated information and try to reincorporate it or try to reinstate it as if it is science, but it's really not. Okay? So, as a matter of fact, to back up what I'm saying, I got some more information. Okay, let's go ahead and let's look up some information. Okay. Okay. Now this website here is called scienceed.ucar.edu. Okay. Now it goes into more thorough details. All right, so it's more for grade school, but you can use this to learn and get some information. Let's go down real quick. Now it says student background. What is and is not science? Don't be fooled. All right, certain characteristics exist that can help determine what is and is not science. The acronym is NOTICE. Can be used as memory hook for these 6 characteristics: natural, observable, testable, tentative, uncertain, and social. Now, the first of these, natural, refers to the fact that science seeks to explain things found in the universe. Sometimes science uses chemicals or resources to create human-made products. This is especially true in engineering. Examples include the creation and use of plastics and polymers. All right. Then it says science must also be observable through human senses or through tools that help us observe what cannot be observed with our senses alone. Tools such as radar, telescope, microscope, or cameras or sensors on satellites are good examples. And then you gotta go on to these natural and observable phenomena must also be testable. We must make predictions about how they will behave, change, or react, and then test these predictions using science methods. Tests in science must be repeatable and predictable. Okay? And it says scientific findings are tentative and temporary. Over time, correction, additional evidence, or contrary evidence may change what we know. When science findings have been tested repeatedly over a period of time, that knowledge becomes scientific theory. Okay, even theories in science remain tentative, although they are less likely to be proven wrong. All right, and it says science is also uncertain. As evidence grows over time, science becomes more certain, but it never attains 100% certainty. All right. Being 99% certain is still 1% uncertain. Weather forecasts are a good example of uncertainty. Weather forecasts are reliable, but the forecasts are nearly always uncertain to a greater or lesser extent. The forecast may call for a 90% chance of rain, but there is still 10% chance it won't. All right. And finally, science is social. It requires collaboration with other scientists, communication of results with one peers, and presenting findings in journals, presentation, and scientific conferences. It may at times require solitary work, but eventually it must be a social in nature and involve sharing the science with the scientific community. All right. So with that being said, the reason why a lot of people will rather rely on science than just rely on religion, doctrine in itself, because science is an ongoing research, okay? Everything is not absolute in science. Everything's not absolute. You have to continuously do more research because there's always things that are upgraded. Like technology is always advancing every year or every single day. You always got a new advance with technology. So with the new advance of technology, you have to upgrade on information that you thought were relevant or was very scientific. You have to go beyond it. Okay. So it's just like when you learning basic stuff in elementary school, you have to go from elementary school knowledge to college advancement. See, elementary is basically the rudimentary knowledge, is the basic form of what you're going to learn from the advanced level. So in order for you to advance to the next level, you have to take it a step further and keep taking steps further and further and further. And then you start to explore and learn more information. Okay. Whereas with religion, it only deals with beliefs, and those beliefs doesn't change at all. It remains the same. And the problem with religion or religion doctrine is that people become antagonized for questioning the relevancy of the information, such as, is it true that this event took place? What period of time did it take place? Who is what? You know what I'm saying? So you're only solely relying on beliefs, but there's not enough evidence to back up those belief system. Okay. So a lot of times it becomes subjectivity. Even with science, they have beliefs. Okay. But they can't just rely on beliefs. They have to be able to bring some form of objectivity to back it up. Okay. So those beliefs becomes hypotheses. All right. But it won't become objective until they start going through an experimental process and start having data collection and then coming down with a conclusion. But again, everything's not 100%. So you might be 90% accurate, but there might be 10% chance that it's inaccurate. Does it make sense? I hope it does make sense. So with that being said, there's still ongoing research. Take, for example, DNA testing. Now, the DNA itself doesn't lie. Okay, the DNA itself is very true. But however, it's like scientists, they discover more information about your DNA. Okay, that they have missed the point. So sometimes errors happen when it comes to DNA result. That's why if you notice, if you take like Ancestry, for example, they always have like updated information, right? And so, like, let's say for me, say my DNA was, let's say I had 14% Molly in me, right? And then the next time I go look at my DNA result, they find 18%. It doesn't mean that my DNA has changed. It's there, but it was just something that was missing. So they have to go back and verify and make sure that the information is consistent. Make sure that they follow through with the method or whatever they have to do. And then they have to go and make some correction on it. You see what I'm saying? So you have to go back and correct some information that you have missed. And that's what it normally happens. You know what I mean? So science is just dealing with ongoing research. It's nonstop. That's why you see archaeologists, all right? They go and dig up more information because why they trying to be able to correct the information they had on files previously in the past, right? And in order for them to go back and correct those information they had on file from years ago, they have to go and do more research. They have to dig and do more findings, meaning that they have to do some more DNA testing, right, on archaic humans or even anatomical humans, or they have to look at mummies and take the DNA results from the mummies to be able to develop some form of accuracy. So it's a lot to science, okay? It's a lot to it. So you can't just dig up the information and say, all right, this is scientifically proven. Yeah, you can always find something that can support your argument, but do you have the courage to say, well, what if I'm wrong? What if my argument is incorrect? What if it was inconsistent? Let me find something that can debunk this source or that can be proven otherwise. That takes a lot. It takes a lot to do a lot of research, and it could take years and years to come up with information. And the hard part about it is you have to go back and debunk the sources. You know what I'm saying? And some things that we're so used to that may be something that seems logical or it makes us feel good. We have to admit to ourselves that, okay, well, maybe it's not so factual after all. Maybe this is not 100%. So we have to put that up to a challenge. You see what I mean? Yeah, you have to be willing to challenge the sources that you have. You have to go and vet it, the sources. When you hear people use the term vetted, that means you have to be able to critique it. You have to be able to go analyze it. You have to be able to go back and find the primary sources and find other sources that could debunk those sources. So it's a lot to doing research and it's a lot to doing science. It's not just one of those things where you can just get it like that and boom, present it. No, it's a lot to it. It's a lot that goes a long ways. And trust me, when I have to look up information, it'll take me a while. It takes me a while to go find out stuff, and I have to keep going and find out more stuff and keep digging and find more information. Then I come across another information. It's like, wow, oh, I didn't know it goes further than that. So that's just the way it is. Let me get back to this article. Okay, and thank you, Artesian Eugene. Thank you. Now we go into terms about the pseudoscience, protoscience. Again, protoscience is merging or near science in terms of confirmed to notice. However, it falls short in one or more ways. Okay. And they use an example here of mental telepathy is an area of study where information is transmitted directly from one brain to another. All right. But I got some information that I can use to kind of back up. All right. Now, this part right here is called non-science. Non-science events do not meet the notice characteristics of science. Example includes belief system, religious belief, as I mentioned, that's considered as non-science, philosophy, personal opinions, or attitudes. Non-science events or phenomena can be logical and even true. However, they are simply unobservable, untestable, unpredictable, inconsistent, or often falls outside of the natural world. Well, let me say this again, going back to what I stated about philosophy. Philosophy is the main branch of all this science, what we call science, social studies, economics, English, whatever. That's the main branch. Okay. So there's some things that could be proven from the philosophical standpoint, right, to be factual. But there's some things that can be rejected. You know what I'm saying? So getting back to this, now as you can see again, it shows you what you do. You use natural. All right, you got to be observable, testable, tentative, okay, uncertain. All right, meaning that everything's not 100%. And you got to be social, meaning that you have to be able to interact and you got to go through the process dealing with peer review. All right, so there's various forms of peer review. All right, you got the first party peer review, okay, which is basically the author knows who you are and you know who the author is, or who, the person that's reviewing your information know who you are and you know the person that's reviewing it, okay? That's the first part of peer review, okay, which they call that open peer review. And second peer review, which is the single peer review, means that the author knows you, but you may not know who the person that's reviewing your information. You see what I'm saying? So that's single peer review because you don't have a clue who the person that's looking at your stuff, but the person knows about they familiar with your work. All right. And then you got the third part of peer review, which is the double blind peer review, meaning that you have no clue about each other. All right. The author have no clue of who you are. And you have no clue. The reader or the reviewer has no clue of who you are, and they have no clue about you as an author. All right. So what they're doing is they're just looking at your information. Okay. They're vetting your sources. And that's what people do when they peer review. They vetted the source. They look at information. All right. And they compare and contrast and they look. And it's often those who are within that the field of study. So let's say if you're doing something dealing with psychology, you may get your stuff reviewed by those, or you're going to get your stuff reviewed by those that's in the psychology field. Okay. And they're either looking at it, they're going to vet it, they're going to critique it, all that extra stuff. All right. Before it passed through. That's what they do. Now, sometimes you got to be careful with the peer review because it can get real tricky. It get very tricky because what you think that might be peer reviewed, that person who may have been the author could have paid someone to say, yes, we peer reviewed this information, and they pass it on up. It happens. But you would not know that, though. That's the part that's tricky. You would not know. But yeah, it happens. Let me also look up, let me give you an example, okay, of what I would say. Well, you know what? Let me show you something else real quick before I go there. Okay, now let's look up the earliest form of Protoscience, all right? Now, under here, I'm on the rationalwiki.org. And right here, they show the example of past Protoscience include alchemy, which developed to chemistry. So before there was chemistry, there was alchemy. Okay? Alchemy was dealing with magic. All right? That's what the main thing was. But now chemistry deals with chemical reaction molecules, organic molecules, and all that extra stuff. All right. So now that you got chemistry, you no longer need alchemy. Alchemy is a study, Like you can study from a philosophical standpoint and understand the historical background of it, but it's not relevant anymore because you got chemistry. All right. Then you got astrology, which developed into astronomy. Now, people still try to use astrology to this day when it comes to zodiac signs, right? Like, for example, my sign is a Virgo. All right. So, so my sign reflects around the middle of August, right? Like towards the end of August, which is August 22nd, and usually lasts up to September the 22nd. Okay. All right. And so that's how they try to calculate the moon and all the other stuff. Then you got the concept about the age of Aquarius. That's also astrology. Yeah. So that too. But astrology gave birth to astronomy. All right. Astronomy deals with the calculation of like the cosmos, like stars and moon, etc. So it deals with much more of calculation. So you can be able to pretty much, scientists got advanced technology to where they can be able to calculate the beginning of the moon, the beginning of the universe, and all that good stuff, right? Something that astrology could not do. So again, astrology is not prevalent as of today. However, people like to play around with it because of the zodiac sign. But it's no longer needed in the scientific world. All right. And down here it goes into herbalism and folk remedies, which developed to pharmacology. So yes, in a very early time period, they dealt with traditional science, traditional medicine. So, and the ancient people dealt with a lot of herbs and all that. But now, well, even in some parts of the world, they still deal with herbs. Okay, they still do traditional medicine, but for the most part, you got the pharmacies that's out here that can be able to transform those traditional herbs into more chemicalized version and be able to put it on the market. So not to say that herb is not necessary or it doesn't need to be used, but you know, you got some people out here who call themselves herbalists and and they're truly not herbalists, because first and foremost, it's a lot of things you gotta go through. Okay. As an herbalist, you have to be able to go through the Food and Drug Administration process to prove your product to be testable and to be useful. Because if something goes wrong with a person's health, then you can end up getting sued. Yeah. So every person that considered to be a herbalist, they really not. They sell what we call the snake oil. So you have to be aware of that. And even some medication in the medical field, you have to be careful too, because you might be given the wrong prescription and things of that nature. But yeah. So now today, a lot of scientists or a lot of medical industry, they use more pharmaceutical stuff than they use traditional herbal stuff. And now, again, it's not to denounce herbs, but they have another technique or way of going about producing medicine. And this is something new to me, Hellenism, which developed to psychology. Okay. Now, Hellenism deals with those who are like insane. You know, that was they were the earliest form of psychologists. Okay. Hellenists, they dealt with people who had some type of insanity or some type of psychotic issues, things of that nature. So they don't no longer use the term Hellenist, they use psychologists. All right. And psychologists are those who can deal with people who have some form of mental behavior and be able to try to give them some form of diagnosis. Or they do some type of field research. And when they compile those field research, they'll be able to send it to the mainstream science, and they'll be able to, in the mainstream science, be able to come up with some type of remedy or some type of a method to help those who have various form of mental issues. Right. Well, I mean, at least you think they would, but that's not always the case. All right. Oh, and this one surprised me. Marxism, which developed to sociology. Come to think about it, yeah, Karl Marx presented a lot of philosophical stuff that is pretty used in today, especially when it came down to the concept about communism, socialism. A lot of the communism, socialism, the political parties, they get their concept from Karl Marx. Okay. So yeah, Karl Marx basically studied groups of people, right, and looked at social interaction, right. So he studied about the bourgeoisie class, right, which is those who have the means of production or own the means of production. Then he looked at the peasants. The peasants are the workers, right, who was making a less amount of money. So he was like the very earliest form of sociologist, okay. And so because his ideas and his concept, it influenced social science and it influenced them into the process of creating sociology. All right. And that's it. Let me go ahead and stop this. Yeah, that's it. There's more information that I want to use. Now, I am going to show you two examples, all right? I'm going to show you an example of pseudoscience and an example of what we call the protoscience. So the first example of pseudoscience, right, which is phrenology. And what is phrenology? Phrenology was an old technique that dealt with the study of a person's brain or the skull of their head to determine their intellectual abilities and things like that. So here it goes. All right. Now, this is phrenology. All right. So phrenology is a form of pseudoscience. And here, I'm going to read this little article. It's called The First Family of Phrenology by Peggy M. Baker, Director of Librarian and Brigham Society and Brigham Hall Museum. So that's where the website comes from, the brighamhall.org. All right. So now here it is. The 19th century was a time of do-it-yourself medicine, with human science still in its infancy and with bleeding and blustering the mildest remedies available to physicians. It took little to persuade the public that with a little common sense, they could do as least as well on their own. Alternative therapies, largely based on wishful thinking and unclear grasps of physiology, became enormously popular. Most of these alternative medicine died a natural death as genuine medical advances caught up with the expectations of the public. The free-for-all that was America in the 1800s, however, led to some remarkably creative medical theories. Among them was phrenology. Now here it is. It says, what is phrenology? Phrenology in its simplest form is a study of the brain based on the belief that the mind is composed of distinct character traits, each centered in a physical area of the brain. The power of character traits physically shape the brain. The brain shaped the skull. Therefore, the skull can be read as an accurate gulk of character. All right. A very simple phrenology head shows that supposed spiritual intellect and propensity regions. Propensities are those traits that attach people to their country and home and secure the preservation of life and accumulation of property. Intellectual traits convey knowledge, originates ideas, and impart memory and the ability to communicate. Spiritual traits gives a moral sense, as well as including such traits as self-esteem and appreciation for beauty. All right. Now check this out. It says, in its later manifestation, phrenology degenerate into silly polar games and outright quackery, as traveling head readers dubbed the gullible to turn a quick profit. The early proponents of phrenology, which began in Europe in the early 1800s, regarded their field as a new area of legitimate scientific inquiry. Responsible Victorian phrenologists were careful to point out that although the particular shape of any individual skulls indicate a propensity for certain traits, it did not predestine character. Phrenologists were very concerned with moral improvement and the proper education of children. So basically, it's shown that phrenology was inaccurate, okay? Because you cannot determine the intellect of an individual based on the shape of their skull. You can't do that. It's impossible, all right? And you cannot determine how the person's character would, how a person would behave or their characteristic based on the brain size, etc. You can't do it. So later on, scientists discovered that that was just a bunch of quackery, a bunch of pseudo madness, and people was making profit by thinking they can be able to determine where the person is based on the shape of their skull. But you know what's so interesting? The Roots came out with an album called Phrenology. Yeah, they had an album called Phrenology. So look it up. Look up the Roots and look up the album Phrenology if you get a chance. Yeah. But let's see what else I can look at. All right, let's see what else I can find on here. All right, so it shows an example right here. It says two boys, the good boy on the left and the bad boy on the right, based on the development of their organs of consciousness, defined as imparting a perception and love of right, an innate sense of accountability, and a disposition to fulfill promises, speak the truth, and strive for purity and moral excellence. So the left picture right here is supposedly a good boy based on the shape of his skulls. And the picture on the right supposedly be a bad boy because of the shape of his skull and how he looks. Isn't that interesting? So you determine a person's characteristic based on the shape of their head. That's funny. That's pretty funny. All right. Okay, so let me stop right there. Now, I have another one that deals with the concept of protoscience, all right? And it is called bicameral psychology. So bicameral supposed to deals with the division of the brain, okay? That's supposed to be bicameral. Now, according to the information, bicameral is considered as being controversial hypothesis. So it has yet to be proven to be scientific by the science community, but the information is still hypothesized. All right. So there was a book written called The Origin of Consciousness. It was called The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. I'm about to show you guys that real quick. As you can see, it's called The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. Written by Julian James. All right. So he wrote this in the 1976, all right, and 1990, but the upgraded version was in 2000. Okay. Now I'm going to read the first part of the introduction. Okay. Now, it says the problem of consciousness. It says, on what a world of unseen vision and heard silence, this insubstantial country of the mind. What ineffable essence these touchless rememberings and unshowable reverency and the privacy of it all. A secret theater of speechless monologue and prevented counsel and invisible mansion of all moods, music and mysteries and infinite resort of disappointment and discoveries, a whole kingdom where each of us reigns reclusively alone, questioning what we will, commanding what we can, a hidden hemimetry where we may study out the trouble book of what we have done and yet may do, an introcosm that is more myself than anything I can find in a mirror. This consciousness that is myself of cells that is everything and yet nothing at all. What is it? Where did it come from and why? Few questions have endured longer or traversed a more perplexing history than this. The problem of consciousness and its place in nature. Despite centuries of pondering and experiment of trying to get together to supposed entities called mind and matter in one's age, subject, object in another, or soul and body in still others. Despise endless discoursing on the strings, state, or contents of consciousness, or distinguishing terms like intuition, sense data, the given, raw feels, the sensor, presentation, representation, the sensation, image, and affection of structuralist introspection, the evidential data of the scientific positives, the phenomenological fields, the appartians of Hobbes, and the phenomena of Kant, the appearance of the idealist, the elements of Mark, the phanera of Pierce, or the category of errors of Rail. In spite of all of these, the problem of consciousness is still with us. Something about it keeps returning and not taking a solution. All right. So that is the first paragraph of the introduction. All right, so let's go down to chapter 1. Okay, book 1, the mind of man. All right, now chapter 1, the consciousness of consciousness. Okay, so I'm going to let me see where I want to read it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this segment right here. All right, it says, the consciousness of consciousness. When asked the question, what is consciousness? We become conscious of consciousness. And most of us take this consciousness of consciousness to be what consciousness is. This is not true. And being conscious of consciousness, we feel it is the most self-evident thing imaginable. We feel it is the defining attribute of all our waking states, our moods and affection, our memories, our thoughts, attentions, and volitions. We feel comfortably certain that consciousness is the basis of concept of learning and reasoning of thought and judgment, and that it is so because it records and stores our experiences as they happen, allowing us to introspect on them and learn from them at will. We are also quite conscious that all of this wonderful set of operations and contents that we call consciousness is located somewhere in the head. On critical examination, all of these statements are false. They are the consume that consciousness have been masquerading in for centuries. They are the misconceptions that have prevented a solution to the problem of the origin of consciousness. To demonstrate these errors and show what consciousness is not is the long, but I hope adventurous task of this chapter. Now I'm going to read this part. Okay, it talks about the extensiveness of consciousness. To begin with, there are several uses of the word consciousness which we may immediately discard as incorrect. We have For example, the phrase to lose consciousness after receiving a blow on the head. But if this were correct, we would then have no word for those was it some somnambulistic states known in the clinical literature where an individual is clearly not conscious and yet is responsive to things in a way in which a knockout person is not. Therefore, in the first instance, we should say that the person suffering a severe blow on the head loses both consciousness and what I am calling reactivity, and they are therefore different things. All right. These distinction is also important in normal everyday life. We are also constantly reacting to things without being conscious of them at the time. Sitting against the tree, I am always reacting to the tree and to the ground and to my own posture, since if I wish to walk, I will quite unconsciously stand up from the ground to do so. Immersed in the ideas of this first chapter, I am rarely conscious even of where I am. In writing, I am reacting to a pencil in my hand since I hold on to it, and am reacting to my writing pad since I hold it to my knees, and it is lines since I write upon them, but I am only conscious of what I am trying to say and whether or not I am being clear to you. If a bird bursts up the corpse, is it corpse nearby and flying, crying to the horizon, I may turn and watch it and hear it, and then turn back to this page without being conscious that I have done so. In other words, reactivity covers all stimuli my behaviors takes account of in any way, while consciousness is something quite distinct and far less ubiquitous phenomenon. We are conscious of what we are reacting to only from time to time. And whereas reactivity can be defined behaviorally and neurologically, consciousness at the present state of knowledge cannot. It says, but this distinction is much more far-reaching. We are continually reacting to things in ways that have no phenomenal component in consciousness whatever. Not at any time in seeing any object, our eyes and therefore our retinal image, or was it retinal? Yeah, retinal images are reacting to the objects. Reacting to the object by shifting 20 times a second, and yet we see an unshifting stable object with no conscious whatever of the succession of different inputs or putting them together into the object. All right. And abnormally small retinal image of something in the proper context is automatically seen as something at a distance. We are not conscious of making the correction. Color and light contrast effects and other perpetual constancies all go on every minute of our waking and even dreaming experience without our being in the least conscious of them. And these instances are barely touching the multitude of process which by the older definition of consciousness one might expect to be conscious of, but which we definitely are not. I am here thinking to Tinchener's, if I'm saying it right, Tinchener's designation of consciousness as the sum total of mental processes occurring now. We are now very far from such a position. All right, so it's a lot to read on, but I'm going to stop right here once I get done. It says, but let us go further. Consciousness is a much smaller part of our mental life than we are conscious of, because we cannot be conscious of what we are not conscious of. How simple that is to say, how difficult to appreciate. It is like asking a flashlight in a dark room to search around for something that does not have any light shining upon it. The flashlight, since there is light in whatever direction it turns, would have concluded that there is light everywhere. And so consciousness can seem to pervade all mentality when actually it does not. The timing of consciousness is also an interesting question. When we are awake, are we conscious are we conscious all the time? We think so. In fact, we are sure. We are sure so. Oh my goodness. I shut my eyes, and even if I try not to think, consciousness still streams on a great river of contents in a succession of different conditions, which I have been taught to call thoughts, image, memories, interior dialogues, regrets, wishes, resolve, all interweaving with the constantly changing pageant of exterior sensation of which I am selectively aware. Always the continuity. Certainly, this is the feeling. And whatever we're doing, we feel that our very self, our deepest identity, is indeed this continuing flow that only sees in sleep between remembered dreams. This is our experience, and many thinkers have this point. Have this spirit of continuity to be the place to start from in philosophy, the very ground of certainty which no one can doubt. Sagito, or was it Sagito Igrosum? Sagito Igrosum. All right. So, as you can see, the subject of consciousness, right, is still very controversial because even scientists cannot prove the objectivity of consciousness. So it all this was subjective point of view. All right. So some people believe that consciousness is this way, and some others say no, it's that way. And so there are those who base consciousness off of their personal experience, right? And there are those who base consciousness off of others' idea of what conscious is. But at the end of the day, who really knows what consciousness is? Who really knows what it is? Nobody. Nobody really knows what that is. But what I am curious to know is this little last part of the paragraph, cogito ergo sum. Let me find out what cogito ergo sum is. Yeah, I need to find out what that word means. All right, so give me a second. All right, so what is cogito ergo sum? Now, oh my goodness. Okay, cogito ergo sum is a philosophical statement that was made in Latin by Rene Descartes. Yeah, Rene Descartes, usually translated into English as "I think, therefore I am." The phrase originally appeared in French as "Je pense, donc je suis," in his discourse on the method so as to reach a wider audience than Latin would have allowed, and appeared in Latin in his later Principle of Philosophy. Descartes explained it: we cannot doubt of our existence while we doubt. A fuller version, articulated by Antoine Leonard Thomas, aptly captures Descartes' intent. Dubito ergo cogito ergo sum. I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. The dictum is also sometimes referred to as the cogito. All right. So Descartes' statement became a fundamental element of Western philosophy as it is prepared to provide a certain foundation for knowledge in the face of radical doubt, while other knowledge could be figment of imagination, deception, or mistake. Descartes asserted that the very act of doubting one's own existence served at minimum as proof of the reality of one's own mind. There must be a thinking entity, in this case, the self, for there to be a thought. One common critique of the dictum is that it is presupposed that there is an I which must be doing the thinking. According to this line of criticism, the most that Descartes was entitled to say was that thinking is occurring, and not that I am thinking. Okay, so basically, cogito ergo sum means I think, therefore I am. So basically, a person may say, well, I think I'm doing this, or I think I am this, I think. So therefore, because I think this way, that's what it is. But you uncertain about that. So you uncertain. So because if you were certain, you wouldn't say I think, right? You would say I am, because you're certain. But when there's some form of uncertainty, that's where people start saying I think, therefore I am, because you don't really know. So you operate from the subjective point of view. So that was the philosophical concept, which was started by a man named Rene Descartes, right? And basically, it's dealing with I think, therefore I am, meaning that based on subjective, based on experiment, based on a person's perception. That's all. But okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I wanted to talk about. Thank you guys for watching, for tuning in. If you like what you're looking at, you can go ahead and share this video, and also make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell whenever I'm on. Hit that notification bell when I'm on. All right, and subscribe to the channel. So anyways, thank you all for watching. With that being said, may peace and power elevation be to all of you. And that's all for the subject of protoscience versus pseudoscience. And until next time, I'll reconnect with you all. So take it easy. Peace.